Welcome, everyone, to the Barely Friends podcast. My name is Isaiah.
My name's Ty.
And wait a second. Where's my partner in crime, usual Eric? Oh, yeah, he's in California. He's hanging out. He's vacationing, so I got my brother on for this episode. But for those who are new, Barely Friends podcast is a podcast where, it's just friends. We're not experts. We're not analysts. We just love the game of basketball. And we just want to talk, mainly Celtics. We're Celtics fans. But any basketball, anything sports related. But today it's just going to be basketball. A lot of news, a lot of good stuff that's been happening in the NBA. And since we're Celtics fans, we have to first discuss the championship, Banner 18. We did it. As Jason Tatum said it, we did it. The Celtics won in, honestly, dominant fashion. We were both there watching at Eric's house, at our friend's house. How'd you feel about the game in general, Ty? And what does it look like for the Celtics in the near future?
Yeah, like you were saying, a very dominant performance by Boston. I know a few of us were a little nervous about the Celtics losing by 38 in that last game. In Game 4, we were worried about how they would respond. Going back to Dallas would have been a very difficult environment to play in, especially considering the loss in Game 4. So it was nice we took care of business in Game 5. Peyton Pritchard with that half-court shot was unbelievable. Mm-hmm. And I think it just goes to show how this team was so role-oriented. Even Peyton Pritchard, those two shots in the finals, I think the last one was in Game 4 where he had that half-court shot, but everyone had a role, even as small as Pritchard's two half-court shots. And I think we just played beautiful basketball the entire way. Great defense. Jaylen Brown, who's obviously the MVP, was picking up Luka Doncic, 94 feet, was just really pressuring him defensively, and he looked gassed. And that was one of the big reasons why he won the award in the first place. Kyrie was just never himself, really struggled in all of the games in Boston that he played. And so we just took advantage of that. We just stepped on the gas and really never let off. And so it was a good performance for the Celtics. I think a lot of fans were happy about the way it went. Normally, sometimes the Celtics will kind of let go of the lead and make things a little bit tense, but luckily I think they knew what was at stake, and they really showed it that night.
Yeah, I think the first half of that championship game was probably the best basketball I've ever seen, or I mean not say ever, but the best basketball I've seen this particular Celtics team play this year. They just played with an aggression, with we are those guys, like the Mavericks. They had Luka and they have Kyrie, bona fide superstars, but they knew, like, if we just play our hardest, like, there's no chance this team is coming back. There's no chance this team is beating us, and that's what they did the first, second half. Third quarter, they were a little, like you were saying, like allowing Dallas to come back a little bit, but they were on the gas the whole time. And Pritchard's half-court shot, man, that felt scripted. That was so amazing. He hit it in the last game, and then just Joe Mazzulla saying, hey, that might have been Joe Mazzulla's best coaching. That might have been his best thing he did as a coach. I'm kidding. I'm joking. But putting him in just for that moment and him making it was amazing. So that was really cool to see. Now you mentioned Brown MVP. I think he definitely deserved it. I will say for myself, you saw Jason Tatum really wanting it. At the end of the fourth quarter, he was, ball dominant, isolating, just trying to score and saying, I am him. And he was good, and you mentioned it, off the podcast. He was doing it more so than scoring. It was passing and rebounding that he was doing it instead of the scoring. And then you had Drew Holiday, who was, just his energy was always there. Stats was not like Jaylen Brown or Tatum's. Scoring was a little lower, but his energy was always there. His defense, his tenacity was always there. I would say those are your three guys in terms of the finalist MVPs. But how do you feel about Brown being MVP?
Yeah, I think there were a lot of commentators on ESPN kind of commentating about this particular MVP, and I think it was Brian Windhorst specifically who was talking about the actual suspense in the building to see who was going to win the MVP. And normally that doesn't happen. Normally there's a superstar, whether it's LeBron James or Kevin Durant or Giannis, where if their team's going to win, you know that they're pretty much penciled in for the MVP. So it was really cool. I think it spoke to the team dynamic of the Celtics, the way that Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum kind of just feed off of one another. And even Jason Kidd early in the series was trying to kind of force the debate a little bit. And he came out and said Jaylen Brown's their best player, trying to egg them on, trying to get in their heads a little bit. But they never really bought into that, the Celtics. And it was just cool to see the way that they played team basketball. So I think either way, any of those three players could have gotten it. I think it was a great result. And yeah, Jaylen Brown, I think one of the major points that people look to for his MVP case was just the defense he played on Luka. And like you were saying before, Jason Tatum, especially in the beginning of the series, was very inefficient. But I personally loved the way that he was facilitating, the way he was driving to the basket, the way that he was distributing out to his teammates. The Celtics are a unique team in the way that all five guys can shoot on the perimeter and all five guys can get to the basket and score. So it was really cool to see the way that Jason Tatum, even though he was very inefficient from three and from outside layup range, the way he was able to distribute. And that was one of the ways that the Mavericks were planning to beat the Celtics was the way that Luka had been able to establish himself in the paint and then distribute to his teammates, whether it was Derrick Jones Jr. or P.J. Washington, just finding guys for open threes. And I think we really used that tactic against the Mavericks in a way that they really couldn't handle because of all of our ball handling and the skills that we possessed as a starting five. So it was great to see the way that they played overall. But yeah, can't be disappointed with Jaylen Brown being MVP. I personally thought it would have been Tatum because of the adjustments he was able to make, despite being inefficient from three-point range. But I think it was a great result either way.
Yeah, I agree. I think any of those three guys could have earned it. Brown's, like you said, Brown's defense, I think against Luka probably was the emphatic, definite point of hey, he deserved to be the MVP because of he was that main person. We switched a couple of times. Any one of our besides maybe Al, any one of our starters could have, and Kristaps, any one of our starters could have guarded, or maybe did guard Luka Doncic, but Brown was the main guard, and he did a fantastic job. So even if the stats show that Luka was there, Brown did a heck of a job to really solidify his MVP. We've talked off podcast. I'm a little hard on the Celtics, on Celtics players, on Celtics coaches, particularly Joe Mazzulla. But I was, I think, a little hard on Tatum. But when you look at overall what he was doing, and I think especially for me, the final few games, well, maybe not game 4, but game 5, just doing it all, and him trying to do what he could outside of scoring was very impressive. And then Drew, just his energy, almost like a Marcus Smart type of energy, almost like a heart of the team type of energy, he was always there. He was in every game. He was there defensively, offensively. He was hitting the shots he needed to shoot. And then you can't forget Derek White. I don't think you would put him in an MVP finalist, but he was your sixth man when it comes to the finalists. Again, defense. He's the best. You could argue the best shot blocking guard in the NBA, and it was shown in the finals. So he was fantastic. Everyone was fantastic on the team. That's why we were so dominant. Only lost 3 games in the whole playoffs. So that was fantastic. Let me get back to Joe for a second. I've been hard on him on the podcast. I don't really see him as a great coach. He's a good coach. Obviously, we won the chip with him. We've talked about just his if he's a great coach, if he's going to be one of the all-time greats. He's one of the youngest to win it in the finals. I already know what your take is, but let's hear it for everyone else out there. What is your take on Joe after winning the finals this season?
Yeah, I think Joe Mazzulla has proven to be one of the best coaches in the NBA this year. I think the way that he was able to turn around those Celtics teams in the past, especially last year, going to Miami and getting down immediately with an 0-3 deficit to a team that was really undermanned in the Miami Heat. We didn't have Porzingis, and we didn't have some of the other pieces that we had traded for last offseason, but there were so many people saying that the Celtics still had the better matchups, the better opportunities. And so the fact that Miami had gotten up so quickly was a little bit of a shock. Obviously, Boston turned it around and won the next 3 games, but I think they ended up losing by 20 at home in Game 7, which led the Miami Heat going to the NBA Finals. So there was a lot of criticism, I think, for Joe Mazzulla on that particular series, but I think he's done a great job of rebounding, and to see the turnaround that he's made so quickly, I think is pretty unbelievable as a coach in the NBA. Just the way that he's stuck to his analytics. He loves his three-point shot. And
he does.
The Celtics oftentimes live and die by the three, right? But the way that he's kind of stuck to his philosophy, and I think the most important part about Joe Mazzulla is he's gotten the Celtics to buy in. There's no one on the team that disagrees with Mazzulla's scheming or the way that he approaches the game, even from the things like him showing the team MMA videos just to try to be prepared for games, right? Like, you know, when people get submitted in the UFC, he's trying to tell them this is how we have to stay calm under pressure, even when we're in a chokehold, so to speak, in a game. So even those kinds of, you know, odd ways of trying to reach the team and get them to kind of focus and press in more, they've worked. And I think that just, again, speaks to Joe's leadership, the way that he's able to galvanize the group and be able to push them forward. And obviously we got over the hump, so I think now Joe's confidence is going to be that much higher to go into next season, to be able to scheme before games and also, you know, in games while he's trying to go against, you know, certain matchups and certain competition. So I think Joe has a really bright future ahead of him, and I really like the status that he has going into next year for sure.
Yeah, you know, I'm not going to dog on Joe like I usually do in the podcast. It's not appropriate. We just won, but in all seriousness, you know, I think the most impressive thing that he has done since Ime left has been keeping a super team, because it's not your general super team where it's like the Brooklyn Nets where they had Harden, Kyrie, and, you know, they don't have a necessary big three, but you could argue they have a big 5 or a big 6, and it's not like they're all superstars, but they're all-star level. So, and for Joe to be able to keep them together, to keep them poised, like, again, you could see them be lackadaisical at times in the regular season, in the playoffs. And you're like, this team's so good. Why do they look like so just lacking energy, lacking, you know, a want to win? At the end of the day, again, we lost 3 playoff games, and we're able to finish it off with a dominant performance in the finals. So, you know, you got to give Joe credit where credit is due. Now, it's about back-to-back, in my opinion. Now it's about dynasty level. Now it's about dynasty level team. And I want to give another MVP shout out. I want to give Brad Stevens a shout out, because what he has done to this roster, I think that's been the best thing that this team could have ever done. You know, I've mentioned plenty of times, but Marcus Smart, you know, I have a T-shirt for him, right? I love the guy. He's great defense. Love the flopping. You know, it was a classic. But when we got Kristaps and 2 first-round picks, if I'm not mistaken, 2 first-round picks from Marcus Smart, that is that is unreal when it comes to NBA trades. And we're going to talk about some NBA trades or some rumors that have it that are going to be also unreal. But that doesn't happen where you get it's not just that should have been the other way around, where it should have been 2 picks in Marcus Smart for Porzingis, and how Steve Stevens did that, I don't know. And then to get Drew Holiday, Derek White, Al Horford, to get him back, you know, he was on the team and then left, and then we got him back. I mean, that was mastery, and he should have so much credit, along with Joe, along with Tatum Brown with his championship. So
yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to jump the gun a little bit and talk about these trades to kind of enter into this conversation a little bit. But you just look at what the New York Knicks gave up to get a guy like Mikal Bridges. You know, 20 points per game, a very, very solid role player in the NBA, and will definitely help them compete with the Celtics next year in the Eastern Conference. But the Knicks had to give up 4 unprotected first-round picks and 1 protected first-round pick. So you're talking about 5 overall first-round picks for the Knicks to go and get a role player essentially. And the fact that we were able to get a guy in Porzingis who can stretch the floor, who's 7'3", who can handle the ball, can post up. I think he had a better post up percentage than Jokic, I believe, in the regular season. So just to be able to get an all-star caliber player like Porzingis and to be able to, again, receive draft picks for such a valuable player was, I think, really important for the Celtics. So, yeah, I think give a lot of credit to Brad Stevens. Obviously, he was a coach for a while at Boston. Had to manage a lot of personalities, and so it was a little bit understandable that they let him go as a coach, but to see him kind of thriving in that president of basketball ops role has been huge for us, and he's been making a lot of great deals from the beginning. So
yes, you got to give for him to stick along the journey. He was coach for 8 years for the Celtics, and then the last 3 have been basketball operations, and so I just a ton of credit to him, to the front office, Wick as well. A lot of credit to that front office. So that was great. Now, looking into this dynasty, into the back-to-back championships, do you think we need to do anything? Do you think we need to add another player? I know you mentioned with the injuries with Kristaps Porzingis, and just there was a lot of times in the playoffs that it was scary and you had to miss some time. So do you think we need a backup, or are there other little holes that we might need to sustain this dynasty?
Yeah, I think the Celtics are in a good position. They're looking to obviously re-sign Tatum to a max extension, which I think is well deserved, especially now that he's won the championship. They're hopefully looking to sign Derek White, of course, and kind of keep the core together. Hopefully, Al Horford decides to stay on the team and not retire, because he's been an NBA vet for a long time now. But I think, yeah, definitely adding depth to that center position for the Celtics would be huge. Looking at a guy who's been kind of rumored to kind of be on the trade block or the free agency market is Kelly Olynyk, a guy that the Celtics drafted and really kind of developed, but ultimately let him go. He became a solid role player for certain other teams. I know Miami was one of them. Can really just be a three-point shooter, kind of like Porzingis, can extend the floor. He's not as great a ball handler as Porzingis by any means, but he gives you that added assurance. And one of the things that was kind of a big topic of conversation for the Celtics in this final series was being able to give Al Horford rest, right? Because he's a starter in the lineup. And again, great 3-and-D player, can even push the floor as a center, which is an amazing bonus. But because of his age, he struggles to kind of have that endurance and that durability throughout, closer to the end of games. So when Porzingis got hurt, we were really stretching his minutes, and his inefficiency kind of really started to show itself while, he was kind of out there and still playing great basketball, but just kind of on the decline as the games continued. So having an additional center and a guy like Olynyk, he's probably going to demand a decent contract, so we'll have to see, the way that the structure kind of shapes up for what Olynyk wants. And but if he's willing to take a cut to be a part of a championship team, I think that'd be a great fit for us. And I think, again, his three-point shooting, his ability to rebound, to get inside the paint would be a huge help for the Celtics, especially considering Porzingis' health risk over the years.
Yeah, and not only Porzingis, but you look at Al Horford and you're thinking to yourself, is he going to retire? This is going to be his last year. He got his ring that he's been waiting for. He is the longest tenured NBA player to win a chip. Karl Malone is the longest, but he never won a chip. So he might be done. However, I think he's still under contract till at least next year, and so he might want to stay for to continue with the dynasty. But I think if you're going to look at one position on the Celtics to acquire a player, hopefully cheap, it would be center because of the injury to Porzingis and because of Al Horford. So I think Kelly Olynyk, again, that is a nice piece because he's been with the team. He is a three-point shooter. And I would like to see Kelly back. I don't like, just as a fan, not even just basketball, just as a player. I think it'd be cool to see him again. So that's not a bad pick. I don't think that'd be bad. Brad, I hope you're watching. I hope you're looking for Kelly Olynyk. So, all right. So that's the big Celtics stuff. We're great. Now we're looking at a dynasty. It's going to be very exciting to see what this team does, what Brad maybe does in the offseason, and looking forward. But right now in the offseason, there is a lot of news, a lot of moving parts that have been happening, that have been going on. So let's start off with on the West Coast with our rivals. That's the LA Lakers. They just signed J.J. Redick to a 4-year deal. There were rumors that UConn's coach Dan Hurley was going to be the coach for the Lakers, but he decided to want to continue to do a three-peat with UConn. So we have J.J. Redick here, and J.J.'s been interviewing with LeBron. He's been talking to LeBron a ton. So there's been some sort of relationship there. But Ty, you've said you kind of like J.J. Redick. You think he's going to be a good head coach in the NBA. Would you mind expanding that to the audience?
Yeah, I think J.J. Redick will do really well. I think as long as the Lakers are willing to have a patience for a first-time head coach, an NBA veteran, obviously who's had a lot of experience around the league with different teams, I think he will continue to grow in his basketball knowledge and his experience as a coach. He's going to learn some of those in-game adjustments that, might be quicker than he's anticipating at the beginning of his tenure as the Lakers coach. I think as long as they give him time to develop, plan for him to be the coach, post-LeBron era, even potentially post the AD era, although I think they should build around him as their key superstar for the next few years or so. I think J.J. Redick has the demeanor, the attitude to be what it takes, to do what it takes to be the Lakers head coach. You need a big personality to be a coach in L.A., and I think J.J. understands that. I think he knows the role that he'll be able to play really well, and he's not really concerned about criticism, and that's one of the things that was kind of talked about in his opening interview, was the fact that despite the criticism of him potentially being a first-time head coach, with him having a previous relationship with LeBron, there might be people who say, he shouldn't have gotten the job over somebody like Mike Budenholzer, NBA coaches who have been in the league for a long time. They picked JJ, right? And so I think he's very aware of the criticism that he's already received, but I think at the same time, he's not going to let that get in the way of his ability to just break down the X's and O's of basketball and take command of that Lakers franchise. So I think it'll be cool to see J.J. Redick on the sideline for the Lakers, and hoping that he can have a good career as a coach, although I am not a Lakers fan, of course, by any means. So hoping that they do well, but still a Celtics fan for sure.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, I enjoyed watching J.J. Redick on First Take and maybe even Get Up if he was on sometimes, some ESPN shows. He was one of my favorite analysts just because he knew his stuff. I mean, he's a former NBA player. He was on the Pelicans for a long time. But his charisma, his character, he can get fired up, and because he's very passionate about the game and he loves the game. So with this first head coaching job for the Lakers, it's going to be a lot of criticism. It's going to be a lot of on the hot seat topics. But if he can withstand the first years as a Lakers coach with all the criticism that's going to come, he's going to do just fine. And that doesn't even mean he'll be a Lakers coach moving forward, like long term, but just an NBA coach in general. This is what he wants to do. If he can withstand these first 2 years with LeBron, who LeBron has a tendency to, he doesn't fire coaches, but like the coaches he's on, they tend to leave within 2 years of a new coach coming on. So if he can withstand that and be on the team moving forward, that's going to be huge for him, not just for the Lakers, but moving forward. I don't think I think it's going to be less about coaching for the Lakers and more so about a roster rebuild. They're not with the Nuggets. They're not with the. I was going to say, roster-wise, they're not with the Clippers, but the Clippers also aren't great right now with all the All-Stars they have. They're not with the Thunder. They're not with the Timberwolves. So. I think they have to look at the roster and do some things around the roster first, and then JJ. You got to give pieces to JJ to work with. LeBron and AD alone is not going to work. You have Austin Reeves. You have all these other midway players, but they're going to need more. They're going to need more to contend in the West because the West is loaded. So I think he's going to need a lot more help around him. So it's going to be critical. People are going to be critical around him, but he's just got to withstand, and he'll be okay. So,
Yeah. I think as well, just looking at the Lakers' position that they're in, the way that they got there was trying to make these massive trades, which paid off in some sense with them winning a championship in 2020 with Anthony Davis. A big part of that was the trade that they made to get him, to get rid of Josh Hart and Brandon Ingram and send all of those guys to New Orleans. So you see these guys kind of thriving around the league now, and either great stars on their teams or great bench leaders on their teams, great role players. And so I think one of the things that the Lakers really have to prioritize in this kind of next phase of their franchise is just the patience, right? The kind of approach that Boston takes when they're trading their star players in Paul Pierce and Kevin Garnett for picks, and they're drafting well, and they're able to develop well and make the right trades at the right time. I think that's more where the NBA is at this current moment. And you look at the Russell Westbrook trade, for instance, that the Lakers pulled off, just ended up being super detrimental to their team. Obviously a big cap hit because Westbrook, I believe, was, had a massive contract at that time. And so they obviously moved on from him quickly. And so the NBA is not in a position now where you can just get 2 or 3 superstars with no role players, with no perimeter shooting, nothing like that. You have to develop a solid team around 1 or 2 superstars. Even again, going back to the Knicks, right? They've got Jalen Brunson. A lot of people consider Julius Randle their 1A, but a lot of people would say Brunson is their superstar. And so this trade to get Bridges, just kind of proves that they're building around one guy, and they're really hoping that he will be kind of their franchise piece for the coming years. And so I think the Lakers have to adopt more of that philosophy and not get too frustrated or kind of give up when they can't get a guy like Trae Young or DeJounte Murray. Because if you're going to end up trading, the rest of your draft capital and some of these quality players like D'Lo and Austin Reeves, is that going to help you? Sure, maybe on the offensive side of the ball, but again, Trae Young is somewhat of a defensive liability. So if you're going to make these trades, you need to make sure that both on your offensive and defensive sides, you're going to be firmly established. You're going to have the depth that you want. You're going to have the draft capital to go ahead and make changes, and even those minimum players that you want to add onto your team, right? These veteran guys that have been in the league for years and years. You want to be able to have them have their experience to mentor these young players that you're potentially bringing in and set them up for success, right? So I think the Lakers have to definitely take a slower approach, but I think if they do that, then J.J. Redick's going to be fine. He'll be able to develop his system, get kind of his analytics into the door in L.A., and I think he'll end up being a great coach, especially in that loaded West.
Yeah, for sure. As a Celtics fan, I don't want to see the Lakers do well, at all. That's just me, as their storied rival for a long time before I was born. But I want to root for JJ. Just again as a coach, and I hope he has a good NBA coaching career. So it's going to be tough in LA, but I think if you're going to put any new head coach, first-time head coach, to have that challenge, I think JJ can do it. So. I'm running